It is the Fantasy Sanctuary Best Ball Show with myself, Tom Strachan, and of course Tyler. But most importantly, Jake Tribbey of Fantasy Points is joining us for this hot, hot best ball summer in his hot, hot apartment. Jake, how you doing, man?
Doing really well. Like I told you guys pre-show, it is 95 degrees here in Augusta, Georgia, and my AC is out. So we are looking at around 88, 89 on my apartment thermostat, but that won't stop me from drafting some fantastic best ball teams with you guys today.
Tyler, how hot is it for you?
It's way hotter outside than inside. Thankfully, we had a scare a couple weeks ago when the AC was running, but it wasn't running, and we had to shut it down for like 10 hours to get it fixed. But it's hot as balls outside, but we're trying to stay cool inside, keep the best ball hot, and the humans and the pups chilly. So sending our thoughts and prayers over to Georgia and Jake during this very trying time.
I appreciate that, Tyler.
Yeah, it does feel like kind of best ball summer ramped up another gear. Like we had all the training camp reports of people starting to come in. We had the guys landing on pup lists and all that, but we thought we might, and it does feel like Underdog have ratcheted up the amount of contests that they had on offer. We will be drafting in BBM tonight, but before we get to that, we're going to talk through some massive upside picks. You can't have a guest.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, man. Was almost so smooth. We can't have a guest like Jake on and not talk about some of the guys that he believes could be game changers this year. So we're going to start with Jake's, and then we're going to come across to Tyler's before finishing with mine, and then we will jump into a draft. So Jake, your three guys: Travis Hunter, who goes at an ADP of 54 and Underdog, Kenneth Walker, who goes at 51, and then JJ McCarthy at pick 121. Now, Jake, I know you haven't drafted much on Underdog yet. You're just slowly ramping up into it, having drafted more elsewhere. Do any of those ADPs shock you at all?
Yeah, I mean, really, I think all of these guys are a little too low relative to their upside. I think Kenny Walker is probably the most surprising overall. I think, Travis Hunter, it's easy to sort of psych yourself out given he's going to play defense and there's everything going along with that. But with Ken Walker, I mean, he was the RB8 by expected fantasy points per game last year. Now the RB16 over on Underdog. And we have to keep in mind that his new offensive coordinator is Clint Kubiak, who schemed up more design targets for Alvin Kamara than 17 NFL backfields by expected fantasy points per team play. Kubiak's running backs have ranked behind only Christian McCaffrey since 2021. And I know some people have concerns maybe Zach Charbonnet could work in a little bit more, but I think, Kenneth Walker is pretty clearly a better fit for Kubiak's scheme. Kubiak loves these outside zone runs. Kenneth Walker, 4.5 yards per carry over his career on outside zone runs compared to Zach Charbonnet at 3.7 yards per carry. Walker also led the NFL in missed tackles forced per touch last year, which is another fantastic running back metric for gauging running back skill. I think everything's really lining up pretty nicely for Kenneth Walker this year, and I'm really surprised he isn't sort of a pick closer to the end of the third round.
Yeah, it's kind of been one of those things. And Kenneth Walker is moving up in ADP. I know our friends over at Fantasy Unleashed, they've been talking about how his ADP is steadily creeping up a bit. Is there a range where you wouldn't draft Kenneth Walker, Jake?
I mean, if he did move up, probably mid-third would be where I would really start to lay off. That would probably be the cutoff point for me. But certainly in the range he's going, I really like Ken Walker.
Yeah, Tyler, how much do you think the most is that we could see Kenneth Walker move up?
I mean, he can so James Cook is going and has been going basically anywhere in the fourth round, pretty much all summer long since the holdout news. Kind of started out at the 3-4 turn anyway before some of that concern. So him flipping James Cook would not be shocking to me. Cook is really explosive. He's really good. And he's in a great offense. Those things matter. But we saw that he's going to be limited from touches. They re-signed Ty Johnson. They're going to have 3 running backs rotating in there, and they're always going to have Josh Allen rushing in all the high value touch areas. For Walker, I mean, as Jake points out, a lot of things are lining up for him. The head coach loves him. The coach speak last year and then coming into this year has been extremely strong. He has gotten way more targets in a game than we ever thought he could. And it wasn't just once. It's happened multiple times, him seeing 7, 8, 9 target games, which is, insane when you think about that kind of like untapped upside with his explosive playability. And yeah, he might now be in an offense that suits him better with Kubiak. I mean, we saw Kamara have an insanely good stretch of the season, which, hard to say, was that Kamara, falling apart, or was that the offense on its last leg down so many offensive linemen, down to a, Spitzer Rattler rookie quarterback, splitting reps. It was a brutal offense. Now, we have concerns about the Seattle offensive line. We have concerns about Darnold, but like Darnold kind of fits well with a vertical attacking style with Kubiak's offense. We saw him target Aaron Jones, and Jones had some really nice games as a pass catcher as well. So, I mean, I think the market's just like, we like him. We're slowly moving him up. We're just worried about his health. And that we did get, a little bit of health news that he's been nursing an ankle thing, which has seemingly been his problem, is like this abdominal or lower body injury stuff. But when healthy, I mean, he's always someone that can crack a big play, even against really stout defenses. We've seen it all the time. He really does strike me as like the quintessential better and best ball type of running back. When he's healthy, he can have a game that scores in the top 5 in the points, upside wise. And yeah, I think anyone in the 4th round feels extremely fair. And then even when you look at that, like he and Kyron are kind of like two sides of a coin, right? Like Kyron sees all the work. He's not very explosive, but the type of touches he sees are really impressive. And Ken Walker is more of like, when he's successful, he is just breaking big plays. We just don't know when that's going to happen, and we have questions about his offense. So I do think that's fair, that if he ultimately, with coach speak, with health, climbs into the 3-4 turn, I think that's fair. I think that's valid, especially on Underdog, considering the type of profile we're talking about.
Yeah, for me, I just don't really understand why he's not in that kind of Breece Hall range. Like, James Cook, like, why is James Cook being drafted ahead of Kenneth Walker? That seems really strange when the regression for James Cook could be so obvious, when the risk of losing his job to the guy behind him feels fairly reasonable. And, we've also got Ty Johnson there. So yeah, I'm very much on board with Kenneth Walker and want to draft more of him. But Jake, Travis Hunter, somebody that is quite divisive. Like, how aggressive are you being on Travis Hunter?
Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable being quite aggressive on Travis Hunter. And I mean, just to generally set the stage about Hunter, I understand that he seems to be the most polarizing player in fantasy football this season. And yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Even over at Fantasy Points, we have tons of great writers. It is very split in terms of what we're expecting from Travis Hunter this year across the board among my coworkers. But yeah, just setting the stage here. I mean, this is a guy who could be the NFL's Shohei Ohtani. Jacksonville traded up to get him, and they have an offensive-minded coach who's absolutely fantastic at scheming targets, along with a wide receiver corps that features Brian Thomas, Daimi Brown, and then guys who will probably end up in my UFL spreadsheets here in a year or two. It is totally empty after these top 3 wide receivers over in Jacksonville. And, I understand wanting to fade Hunter on the basis of these route concerns. I mean, if he's only at 50 or 60% of routes, I understand how that could be pretty detrimental to his fantasy upside. I mean, Scott Barrett would probably lay me off if I didn't rattle off the stat that just said no player in the last 4 years, this is since Fantasy Points started collecting data, has finished as a top 45 wide receiver in fantasy without running at least 2/3 of their team's routes. So, obviously people being hesitant about Travis Hunter on the basis of route concerns makes sense. But I do think, especially with this coaching staff, the route concerns might be a little overblown. So last year, Chris Godwin averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game. That's wide receiver 27 mark on a 52% route share from just the slot. Now, I'm not saying Travis Hunter is going to be slot only, but if he did only run 50% of routes, something like 13 to 15 fantasy points per game is still a reasonable ballpark, given that Liam Cohen is fantastic at scheming up design targets. Yeah. We also know, Scott Barrett tweeted this out a few days ago, no quarterback threw to their first read more often than Travis Hunter. So if Liam Cohen is scheming up plays where Travis Hunter's the first read, it's probably going to be a throw from Trevor Lawrence to Travis Hunter. The other interesting note that I had is Travis Hunter targeted the slot, and I'm actually writing an article about this that should be out on fantasypoints.com here shortly. Trevor Lawrence targeted the slot at the second highest rate in the NFL last year, and I'm not sure that there's a natural fit in the slot among any of these Jacksonville wide receivers. I think Brian Thomas will get a good amount of work in the slot. He was very efficient from the slot last year, but I don't think it'll be all Brian Thomas. And a good amount of those targets could end up going to Travis Hunter. And, overall, let's just rewind to this Tampa Bay offense last season. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 10 finishes by fantasy points per game last season. So, overall, you put all that together, I think there's just an incredible upside argument for Travis Hunter. There's also a decent floor argument for Travis Hunter. I would be pretty surprised if he finished worse than, say, wide receiver 35, wide receiver 40, if they are scheming him these targets. And then I made a quick list of outs that he has for a full-time route share, 80% plus of routes. And if he hits this, I think he almost certainly smashes. Brian Thomas, like I said, only serious target competition there. They're probably going to need Travis Hunter just out there in general. If Hunter ends up being really good, they're going to want him out there earning those targets. If Jacksonville has any chance at a playoff spot come the end of the year, and keep in mind, these are the most valuable weeks in fantasy football, they're going to be pushing Travis Hunter snaps as hard as they possibly can, assuming he's competent on both sides of the ball. And I think we also have to consider, and this often isn't talked about for wide receivers because it's a little more murky, but, looking at these wide receiver rooms across the league, the contingent upside for Travis Hunter would be insane if Brian Thomas went down. I mean, he would be the entire wide receiver room at that point.
He's not playing defense at that point.
I think you're right about that, Tom. So, to me, the upside case for Travis Hunter is absolutely fantastic. And, I understand that there are, I think, very reasonable downside concerns. And the bear case for Hunter is extra complicated because he's playing these defensive snaps and we're not exactly sure how things are going to look. But I would just be really scared fading Travis Hunter that I realized midway through the week 1 game that, he's going to be a really special part of this offense. And he's actually an amazing football player.
Yeah.
I'm really curious what you guys think about that.
Well, I think, Brett's points in the chat are kind of valid. He's brought plenty of good points in the chat. But, one thing I can't get away from, and it's in a video which put out on the channel yesterday about, Trevor Lawrence's expected touchdown total for this season is 22.5, which is definitely on the lower end of things for starting quarterbacks, particularly ones who we view as being fantasy relevant. If Trevor Lawrence is only throwing for a little over 1 passing touchdown per game, then it feels like we're going to get into situations where the team want to help him out more, unless this running game is particularly great, which I don't necessarily think it will be. So why would Travis Hunter not be out there trying to help Trevor Lawrence? Because if this coaching staff don't think Trevor Lawrence is the dude, then a year from now, they're going to be making a decision on that, aren't they? So I think it's interesting. I do like Travis Hunter. In redraft, I think it's going to be a real nightmare. You look at his redraft ADP, and early redraft ADP on some platforms is down in the 70s, and I can completely understand that. But Tyler, I know you're definitely on board with this one.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think we just have to center the discussion around. And I think Jacob Sanderson does a great job of this. And, you mentioned your boss, Scott, also does a great job of upside wins championships in home leagues, upside wins championships in best ball, upside wins championships in DFS. If you want to win, you have to chase upside. Floor does not win you dick. It wins you 6th place. Congratulations. You made no money. So first and foremost, that's why we're talking about upside. And for Travis Hunter, the upside case is more compelling than the downside case, because the downside case is that the 2nd overall pick on a Liam Cohen offense attached to a, at worst, league average quarterback who is very explosive is just absolute dog water. That's the downside. He's just a phenomenal bust. And the likelihood of that happening is debatable, but we haven't seen that level of downside in quite some time in the modern NFL, because we've seen so many offenses figure out what's not working and make it work. We just saw this with a much worse Jaguars offense. We did not see a very competent use of Brian Thomas Jr. until the back half of the season, when they said, fuck it, feed him the ball wherever he is. And look, good things happen. So this organization already saw that happen. There's new players in town, but those new players are coming from the Rams and the Bucks, who have been feeding their guys really good looks schematically and making it as easy as possible on the quarterback. That's one reason to be bullish for not just the offense, but for like Trevor Lawrence. Is like the easy button offenses are the ones we want to invest in. We've seen that with all the, the Shanahan tree. Make it easier. That's plentiful for scoring, plentiful for fantasy. So like that right there, I think is the center of the discussion. And then when it comes to Travis Hunter, yes, the defensive reps are concerning, but we don't know what that range is. And we should be going after variance. Like the market being scared on variance is why his price has fallen a whole round of ADP the last month or two. But that's a reason to invest in it, because it's kind of like investing in the stock market and buy the low, because when it rises, you're getting the most out of that. Now, from like a physical standpoint, I don't care that he's 180 pounds. He profiles just like Stephon Diggs, who was extremely efficient, and especially efficient from the slot before he broke out as like a full-time perimeter role player on like deep passing touchdowns. We've seen guys like Devonta Smith coming out as a Heisman winner. Oh, he's too slender to win. He's been earning over 100 targets every season and been very good. The reason why he's not a superstar is because he's playing alongside an absolute gam. But we still draft him in the top 4 rounds year after year because of how explosive and efficient he is, even with passing like volume concerns. I'm far more confident that we're going to see a lot more passing out of the Jags than we will out of the Eagles, given how their offense is. And, Tom, great mention about the running game. The O-line still kind of sucks. The run game probably still sucks. We're hoping Tootin or Etienne or Tank are like efficient and explosive. At the end of the day, when we simplify things, they look a lot like the Cowboys, who I think in most instances are just passing a lot more than they're running the ball because of where the strength lies. And to Tom's point, and Jake mentioning, like, this new staff needs to make the quarterback work. To make the quarterback work, you give him weapons. And I love the point about the slot, because you go pay a guy like Diami Brown $10 million a year because you see a vision, and the vision so far has been you're starting on the perimeter to be our speed, do a little bit of short stuff, but to allow us to play Brian Thomas Jr. either in the slot or outside, and Travis Hunter in the slot or outside, letting just easy mismatches, yak, and explosive quick hitting outs matter. We've seen that work for a variety of players, and these guys are very explosive. So it's like, to me, it's a very simple thing of I see a wide range of outcomes, and in a lot of those outcomes, he is awesome for fantasy. This whole offense is awesome for fantasy. I see a very condensed offense where like this is like Waddle, Tyreek, with just 2 very explosive guys that can see, more than half of the offense's touches and targets, and then it doesn't matter. Right. So like that's what I envision as the upside. And that's enough for me to invest at this price, because the downside is, well, I swung big and I missed small. Whereas I don't think there's a lot of clear guys to take over him that don't have similar types of downsides and concerns, but probably smaller, true, like 95th, 99th percentile ceilings, which is ultimately what we're after. And also a fun Giga Brain fact is that week 8 bye week has the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we've seen a lot of breakouts happen after that. I like a rookie like this to get an earlier bye week for the team to just say, let's punch it all the way in. Like this makes so much, like, we also, I know, Fantasy Points also talks, and PFF has talked about like weak link systems. It's far harder to have a very good defense because of one really elite corner, but it's really easy to have a really elite offense because of explosive playmaking and just scoring more. And Travis Hunter being an elite Darrelle Revis corner, which is also not super likely, does not make this defense elite by any stretch of the means, because the rest of the defense is still kind of shitty. So I reject some of this overconfidence. And I think if we're uncertain, invest, because the upside far outweighs the downside.
Yeah, I am really, really excited to play Travis Hunter in week 1 DFS, because that's when we're going to figure all this out. That's when everything is going to be revealed, and people are going to be pretty scared ahead of time to invest in a player like Travis Hunter. I mean, I dabble a little bit in college football DFS. Week 1 of the 2023 college football season, Travis Hunter was like 0.5% owned in the big college football DFS contest, because no one really knew what to expect. I mean, sure, he was playing both ways at Jackson State, but can he do it at Colorado? No one was really sure. And he scored like 30 fantasy points that week. I mean, he had a fantastic game. So I'm really excited to lean into Travis Hunter early on, especially week 1 and some of the weekly formats. And like Tom said, I think a fantastic best ball pick. Redraft, I totally understand wanting to lay off, because he probably will have weeks where maybe he plays 85% of the snaps on defense, but 40 to 50% of the snaps on offense, and that can be really, really frustrating for
We
redraft.
also like drafting part-time players anyway. Like Jaden Reed and Josh Downs are slot-only receivers that are maxing out at 72, 75% snaps and routes, but they're so explosive that when they hit your lineup, it's really, really explosive and really meaningful. We're paying a 2 to 3 round premium because those two players I just named are 3rd and 4th round real draft capital guys who are confirmed slot only. Jaden Reed was getting drafted in the 5th round last year, and we had concerns about his part-time play. So again, if this is a slot only player who is a 2nd overall real NFL draft selection, to me, that's a far clearer bet to make. And because we're thinking that he's a part-time player on offense. And if we're wrong, that price is egregiously wrong. And if we're right, the price could still be too cheap because of how explosive and good he and or the offense are. And you mentioned the contingent upside. Players miss with injury. We saw Brian Thomas Jr. benefit from more guys not being available and more of the offense condensing around him. So it's like a long NFL season. I'm far more excited about the profile in the offense than I am not. If we hear that things aren't really gelling and Trevor Lawrence still isn't really picking it up, the offensive line, those are different concerns than just the player. And if we hear that Travis Hunter's having a hard time getting it, but everything we heard was that he's picking up the defense, that's his natural position, and now he's focusing on the offense to get things crisp. Well, to me, that seems like a good thing, Well,
so. Yeah, I mean, like it just comes back to in best ball, we're shooting for upside, as you started off by saying, Tyler. So yeah. I'm completely with you. I know that for some people, it's just not going to be an easy click. Like Brett, you made plenty of good points, but like it seems like by this point in the offseason, a lot of people have their stances drawn, and they're probably not going to be convinced too much, which is fine. I'm completely okay taking that risk. Jake, JJ McCarthy, somebody that some people would see possibly as a bit of a risky pick because we just don't know, but you see him at pick 121 overall, QB 15, I think he is, as a massive value.
Yeah, I do think this is a pretty interesting value. I did want to say that in this range, I also really like Drake May, but the more I've been listening to content, it seems like everybody really likes Drake May. So I wanted to be a little bit more unique.
You have a StreamYard subscription, then you like Drake May.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think the McCarthy angle is pretty interesting here, and this should be a much quicker discussion than Travis Hunter. In 2024, Minnesota threw for the 5th most passing yards and the 5th most passing touchdowns with Sam Darnold under center. 2023, Minnesota threw for the most passing yards and the 5th most passing touchdowns, despite 8 games from Joshua Dobbs and Nick Mullins. To me, there's a pretty good chance that JJ McCarthy is at least as good or even better than Sam Darnold. By the way, Sam Darnold was the QB 11 by fantasy points per game this year. McCarthy currently available at QB 16 on Underdog. And another interesting note here is that I read a lot of different scouting reports, just getting ready for all the rookie players, all the guys we haven't seen. Brett Whitefield is the guy who does our draft guide over at Fantasy Points. He has a really fantastic mind for this stuff. He's also our lead charter, so he watches a ton of film over the course of the year. One of the most interesting takes that I saw in the 2024 offseason was Brett Whitefield had JJ McCarthy as his QB1 overall in the draft, ahead of Caleb Williams. And it was very interesting to me because he was quite down on Caleb Williams relative to consensus. And while that doesn't necessarily mean his McCarthy take is more or less likely to be right, I do think we need to leave some room here for JJ McCarthy being incredible. I think people look at his college stats and say, oh, he only threw for, 2,800, 2,900 yards in a senior season of college. Have to keep in mind that was in an extremely run-heavy offense. And he also got pulled, I think it was Brett who had the note, in like 8 or 9 different games by the 4th quarter. So
yeah, he played like no 4th quarter. It was like very like Dallas blowing out their opponents by the 3rd quarter and the offense just getting shut down.
Exactly. No, yeah, it was exactly like that. So I think we need to leave some room here for JJ McCarthy being very competent. And I think another good note is that, sure, he was hurt all of last year, but he's had a full year and a half to learn Kevin O'Connell's system. And we know just from the stats that I rattled off, this is a great system for producing passing stats, and he has great weapons. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison has some suspension concerns, but he'll be back for the weeks of the fantasy season that really matter. TJ Hawkinson, this should be a really great offense, and I like JJ McCarthy a lot. I think a couple sneaky long shot bets, if you guys are in legal betting states, McCarthy to lead the league in passing yards or passing touchdowns, you can get anywhere from 20 to 25 to 1 on those if you shop around, and I've sprinkled a little bit on those bets as well myself. But yeah, I really like JJ McCarthy this year, and just overall, I really like Minnesota stacks.
Yeah, I think like it's so easy to just bring this one down to just a couple of key points. The weapons are incredible. How can you not be excited about that? The system has been incredible. And then thirdly, something which possibly gets talked about a little bit less, but this is an old team, the Vikings. There's a lot of veteran players on it. And I think when you've got that many smart, older players in the team and in the dressing room, that can really have an added benefit for a young player like this who sat and did watch and was around all those players last year. Tyler, how much JJ McCarthy are you taking before we move on to your upside players?
I'm trying to get as much as I can. It ends up just being in range where a lot of quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends I'm targeting on Underdog. As his price has risen, it's just become harder to take him like regularly as like a smash easiest target over the rest of his guys. But I agree with all those points. I mean, like this is as simple macro zoom out as we can get. And if we zoom in, really the only bugaboo is he was the last quarterback selected in the first round. He missed his rookie season, and his tape leaves a lot of question marks of who he is for sure. But we've seen guys like that still succeed. Jordan Love, famously had just as few starter reps as Trey Lance coming into his full starting year. And you know what we saw? A Shanahan disciple coach heading the system, making things very easy, and him being, good enough to be a fantasy superstar for stretches of the season. And I view McCarthy in the same line of that. Like being in a play action QB friendly system is just so easy. I think the fourth point, Tom, that gets talked about, the least as well, is that this was a team that invested top 5 like allocation towards the interior offensive line going into the offseason. And we saw that be the one big issue for this offense, stalling out and not scoring and leading to their worst quarterback struggling. And that's huge for a rookie coming in to get interior help. We've seen that be an issue for pocket passers. So, this feels like a really hard way to fail as an ADP from a season long perspective, as well as just a single spike week. I mean, it's like if we knew he was very good, he'd be going like 5, 6, 7 rounds higher as, like an 8th, 9th round pick at the lowest. I wouldn't be surprised if we're drafting him way too high, like Justin Herbert's second year, because, oh my God, he was just electric. He was super efficient and he scrambled more than we thought. And all those things are viable. The health, it seems like he healed from a not full tear much earlier than we thought. And then the athletic piece coming out that KOC made time every week to meet one-on-one with him to make sure it wasn't a lost season and he was learning the ropes. And all the coach speak we got from the early off-season spring stuff was that he's taken it very well and he's right on track and ahead of where we would want him to be from a play calling standpoint. So all those things point to really bullish things. I have a hard time not just clicking with very, very safe comfort.
Yeah, I think it's a smart point by FK Coolers. I think one thing you give pause is the Vikings defense holds up well. They could try to win via both running backs and defense, not to put not too much pressure on JJ from the jump. Absolutely love that point. But the Vikings were number 2 in pass defense DVOA last year, number 3 against the run in DVOA as well. And it's also fair to just rebuke it and say, defense regresses year over year. Defense tends not to be as sticky. So I do love that, but I couldn't weigh it too much when I was on the clock. Tyler, let's move over to yours and we'll whip through mine and yours a little bit quicker before we jump into our draft in maybe 5-10 minutes time. But your 3 players, Bashal Tutin, Emeka Egbuka, and Devontae Adams. I feel like most people who've been around this channel before on a Monday night have definitely heard your Devontae Adams spiel. But Jake, out of those 3 players, do any surprise you?
I'm curious what Tyler's take is on Egbuka. That I feel like he's kind of a harder player for me to figure out, given the uncertainty with the Godwin injury. It's hard to see, if all 4 of these wide receivers are healthy, where exactly does Egbuka end up? I'm curious what your take there is.
Yes, I mean, first and foremost, I liked his profile going into the draft. We heard whispers that he might sneak into the first round. He does. He goes to an offense we didn't expect. But that being said, he's attached to an offense that we've seen overachieve year after year. We expect some regression. That said, this offense just keeps adding weapons, adding players around. They have internal hires. So the consistency point isn't as concerning. Godwin seems expected on track. I know he's not taking part in things right now, but that seems expected. Adam Levitan of VTR noted today that this same organization previously slowly ramped Godwin off an ACL that happened mid-season, slowly into training camp, still starting week 1. So, but I do just think that range of outcomes, Egbuka, first round wide receiver who looked like a very talented route runner, not just slot only, kind of the same thesis with Tank Dell is, he's not slot only just because of his size. He did, I think if I'm recalling correctly, he was even more impressive outside than slot. This offense pretty much says Godwin is our slot and everybody else play everywhere else. We saw McMillan have a very awesome opportunity, even right out the gate. Like he famously dropped like 4 touchdowns, went right through his hand in the first few weeks. So Slappy's like me, just like raged against the machine for not getting those early points. And then he smashes down the stretch with Godwin missing time, Evans missing time, and then just he and Baker having really good rapport. All the reports from Egbuka were that he was ahead of McMillan where he was coming into early OTAs. He was a better draft capital and a stronger looking prospect. Baker and this offense have just had a very high aggressive passing ceiling, and the range of outcomes of any of Evans or Godwin missing time are out there to give him more opportunity. And even if he doesn't, I think that just he has an easy out to just beat McMillan for the third wide receiver role right out the gate, given all those things. Because McMillan was fine, but he wasn't like impressive. He just scored touchdowns. And how much of that was him? How much of that was just like Baker and this offense being aggressive? Their defense still looks like a weak point in the passing secondary. And, it's just keeping it simple. Like I think the upside that a first round pick attached to a Baker Mayfield aggressive Tampa Bay scoring offense with 2 aging receivers that I'm taking sometimes, far more Godwin than Evans. But like we've seen what the receivers on this offense can give us. We've seen a worse profile be a huge win at a slightly reduced cost. And to me, that's just a player that you invest in, because I find it very hard to believe that a first round pick is not going to make his way into the starting lineup at any point during the season, even without injury. And during the money weeks, that's the kind of profile that we see break out all the time. Maybe you're paying a little bit of a premium, but I would argue you're also getting a depressed price right now because everybody's like, he's the 4th receiver on the depth chart right now. Where's he gonna fit in? And to me, that's the type of thing to invest in, because we can be wrong on a multitude of things. And even if he's a rotational player, he could command targets, because at the end of the day, Cade Otton's just a guy out there, and even without health, he could just be very talented, and Baker just pick up where he leaves off. Tristan Wirf's missing at least 4 weeks, could be more from that injury, could sap the ability of this offense to be very good. Could also just force them to have to be very quick hitting, very pass heavy, because the run game is not as good. And we just might see a lot more Baker Mayfield 45, 50 passing attempt games than we would normally see with a healthy offensive line. And that just might make enough opportunity for the rookie to capitalize on. So it's just, I think he's got a lot of outs, and the profile looks like a strong one to invest in, especially with a lot of the film and analytics people liking a lot of what he looks like. We've seen like this Amon-Ra St. Brown type of guy hit in a lot of different ways, and it just seems like a clear bet.
So he's kind of one of those guys who's starting to creep up in ADP at the minute. Like I know over on FFPC, he's up like 12 spots in the last 3 weeks. On Underdog, he's up like 6 spots in the last week alone. And obviously part of that is because Godwin not taking part. And those kind of rises are a little bit inevitable, but like he sits there a minute, wide receiver 48, just behind Darnell Mooney, Josh Downs, Khalil Shakir, Stephon Diggs. Like, how much higher are you willing to chase him, Tyler?
I mean, if we get confirmation that he has earned the starting wide receiver 3 role on a team that plays a lot of 3 receivers, I'm going to be tempted to take him over Golden and Reed potentially. I like he and Golden, there's no reason why he shouldn't be next to Golden. I know Golden's like theoretical upside is that he's the starting boundary receiver on an offense we expect to pass more, but we've seen Green Bay pass a whole lot less than Tampa Bay's offense has passed, and Golden's profile is a little bit shakier from like a target earning perspective than Egbuka's. So I see no reason for him to be well above the slot only option in Reed, even if he's explosive and exciting. And some of the older guys that, we see older guys get phased out all the time. Rookie steam is never enough. And, we've been wrong about, this guy's never going to see the field. How's he going to see targets with rookies every single year? And first round wide receivers don't get phased out or forgotten very easily.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move over to my players before we end up jumping into a draft, which we'll be doing very soon into BBM. So my 3 players, Colson Loveland, ADP of 128, Tyler Algier, 151, and Darnell Mooney, 85. Jake, let's leave the Falcons alone for the moment. But Colson Loveland at ADP 128, like, do you feel like this is a good year to be investing in the top end rookie tight ends?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I love Colston Loveland. I'm really glad you listed him. I actually considered both Loveland and Algier for my list as well. But yeah, Colston Loveland, fantastic pick here. Got to keep in mind, they spent the 10th overall pick on him, and just looking at Sam Laporta's usage should get you pretty dang excited about Loveland, given where he's going in drafts. And I think the other big thing to keep in mind with Loveland is that he is a way better prospect coming out than Sam Laporta was when he came out of school. So, this could be really, really awesome usage for Colston Loveland. And, it's a young guy, relatively cheap price tag in a Ben Johnson offense. I mean, I don't know if you necessarily need much more than that. And it sounds like he's right on track with the shoulder injury recovery, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were seeing. Like the Bears talked about the fact that they were expecting that to be the case, and I'm very much excited about him. We are underway in our draft, so let's move over there, but we can keep talking about those picks. So we are into BBM, but yeah, with Loveland in particular, I just feel like we've seen enough from rookie tight ends over the past few years. I talked about this on a video on the channel recently, but like, rookie tight ends have become slowly more productive out of college since 2021 when Kyle Pitts emerged. And obviously, Kyle Pitts has been trashed since then. But Kyle Pitts was good in his rookie year. Sam Laporta was good in his rookie year. And people can push back and say Sam Laporta was only good because of the touchdowns. Well, he scored 9 touchdowns. Scoring 6 touchdowns as a tight end is an impressive season. Scoring 9 as a rookie points to being a good player and having really good coaching staff. And now that coaching staff is in Chicago, and I'm supposed to not be excited because it's Chicago. Like, look, when I look at Chicago, I just don't see not remove the tight end thing, just the fact that I don't see players who I'm necessarily thinking they are dominant when it comes to scoring touchdowns. DJ Moore, for all the good that he's been over his career, hasn't been a prolific touchdown scorer. Cole Kmet hasn't been prolific at anything. DeAndre Swift has been prolific at getting coaching staff to dislike him by halfway through the season. So I'm very much willing to take my bets on Colston Loveland. So it makes me happy to hear you with me on that one, Jake. Tyler, I know you like Colston Loveland too.
Yeah, I mean, like the worry about the shoulder was always a little overblown because the staff cleared him and knew, hey, this is the timeline we expect. As long as he gets on the field for training camp, not too much of a worry. And the doctors I trust, trademark, seem to think no real issues with week 1 availability. Jake, we're on the clock here at the 9 spot on Underdog. You famously haven't done a lot of drafts. What are you doing here in the 9 spot?
Ooh. I would say probably either Neighbors or Genty would be my favorite picks here.
Let's play ADP then and see if we can't get both guys for a little bit of week 17 correlation. Genty has been slipping now with an ADP of 12.4. I've seen a few folks get him after the HN, Henry, BCJ, London tier. So I'll be interested to see what happens here out of the 9 spot for us.
So you're pretty high on Genty then, Jake?
I mean, I'm pretty any running back taken top 10. I think is a pretty good bet in their rookie year. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to grab me some Genty. I think I like him a little more on Underdog than I do in DraftKings, and he's going right around the same spot.
Yeah.
On DraftKings, but this just seems like a slightly better format given that it's half PPR. For Genty, it would be pretty sweet if he fell to us here. Ooh, all right, there we go. It's great start.
Well played, Tyler.
Jake, I do like to give the opportunity of hitting the nut button when we get our nut pick
I
here,
will.
so.
I will hit the button.
Fantastic. And we're gonna hit the draft button now for a little bit of week 17 correlation, a little value hound scoop here. God damn, that's nice.
Okay, so my other guys who are on the list, Tyler Algier, one of them, and then Darnell Mooney. Like, yeah, perhaps there's a world where the Falcons just aren't as good as I expect, but like Bijan Robinson went RB1 in this draft, kind of slowly pushing ahead of Saquon on a lot of best ball platforms to be the RB1 overall in ADP. And I just think it's unreasonable to leave Tyler Algier languishing where he goes when we have all this expectation from Bijan Robinson. And we saw it, like, I love Fantasy Points Data Suite. I use it a lot. And there's so many ways that you can flick through the filters there and just see Tyler Algier pop up towards the top of them. Like, Jake, if you could finish draft season with a certain level of exposure to Tyler Algier, how heavy would it be?
I would probably want just a hair under, say, maybe 20%. And that's largely just because if anything happens to Bijan Robinson. I mean, if we heard right now that Bijan was out for the year, Algier would go, probably round 3?
Round 3, round 4. I think
round 3, and it would push into 2 by the end of the summer, I'm sure.
You're probably right about that. And so, I mean, to me, that's just a great value. If anything happens to Bijan, all of a sudden we're looking at a guy who's probably locked in no matter what to 14, 15 fantasy points per game, maybe more, in what should be a pretty good offense for fantasy overall. So yeah, that's really exciting. Another thing that I've noticed just in some of the research I've done this year, every team in the NFC North has a super soft schedule because they're playing all these other NFC North teams. And I don't know how much stock you can really put into strength of schedule when there is a lot of variance in predicting defensive outcomes headed into the year, but that's certainly another boost for a guy like Algier or the other guy you mentioned, Darnell Mooney, as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mooney, it's just kind of like, it feels like a natural fit with Penix.
Yeah.
Like, he had caught, I think 7 of his 11 targets in the 2 games they played together for like 120 yards or something. There's plenty of reason to be optimistic, and I can't be optimistic about Bijan, Drake London, and Tyler Algier without that kind of filtering through to Darnell Mooney at a certain point as well. But we are 2 picks before us, obviously moving quite quick with these 20-second clocks. But Genty, Malik Neighbors, really fun start so far. Jake, where do you want to go with pick 3?
Let's go Breece here. Start strong
Nice.
at running back. I find the most compelling argument for Breece is that, this is the Lions passing game coordinator. Lions schemed up the third most design targets to running backs last year, and top 5 overall in terms of running back targets. We know Breece's strength is as a pass catcher, and in a Justin Fields offense, it might be easy to say, oh, Fields is gonna detract from what Breece offers as a rusher. I think Justin Fields will make Breece more efficient, and I think I already mentioned this, I'm writing an article on quarterback positional target tendencies. The 2 rushing quarterbacks who actually target running backs are Justin Fields and Kyler Murray. So I don't necessarily think Fields is a negative for Breece's pass involvement this year.
Yeah, and that offensive line gets a huge boost with the first round tackle that it was desperately needing. And yeah, I mean, the committee, comments are the ones kind of keeping his ADP low, but we've seen that he's been clearly head and shoulders better than the other guys. And if the volume's going to be heavy, then it could, even out any sort of snap share concerns. What would you like to do here on the clock at 40? Worthy, Kittle, Tet, Moore, assuming receiver here.
I really like Tet here. That's generally where I'm going in this range. Seems like it'll be pretty easy for him to stand out as a true alpha in this Carolina pass offense, and we know, historically.
Is that because he's 6'5"?
That could be Bryce Young as a reason. Yeah, exactly. Bryce Young can't miss him. That's an easy guy to see over the heads of their offensive linemen. But I mean, we know that these rookie wide receivers are generally a cheat code because of their late season usage. We see huge spikes in it typically, and Ted just seems like a great candidate for that. And he was a fantastic wide receiver prospect coming out. I see no issues with the Ted pick.
Do you think we're getting a bit of a discount on Tet because Marvin Harrison let everyone down so badly last year?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably true to some extent. But what's funny about that is if you rewind even just 1 more, 2 more years, then you're getting into guys like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, some of the greatest wide receiver seasons we've seen from anybody, much less rookie wide receivers. So, I mean, yeah, I think if it weren't for Marvin Harrison, Tom, Tet probably would be going half a round sooner this season.
I also think, just to get really sicko with it, best ball has never been more popular. And I mean, you saw that with all the pre-draft contests and all of the sitting out, dropping FUD type of thing that happened. I don't think he ever rebounded in ADP from people thinking, oh my God, I think he's going to be the third or fourth receiver. I don't even know he's in the first round anymore type of like ridiculous fun. And then he goes to an offense that no one's really excited about outside of the running back. We're still not believing in Bryce. We're still worried about, this offense. Adam Thielen's still there. Xavier Legette, first round receiver there. But like Thielen could easily be moved in his contract year or phased out completely. Legette looks like a huge bust as like a very raw guy that missed a lot of time. And the next most excited guy people are talking about is either undrafted free agent Coker or are we going to go super robust here with a little falling Kenneth Walker?
Let's make it
I want
work.
a super robust Kenneth Walker.
Fantastic. A little correlation with our 6'5" King, Ted McMillan, and
perfect.
We're already off.
Then we can load up on some of these later round wide receivers out here.
Nice. I think that's a fun spot.
Who are you highest on in this range? It seems really, really flat. It's
hard for me not to love Juwan Jennings, especially given Ricky Pearsall is starting the year off on the NFI list. That was pretty unexpected. I didn't realize he was still dealing. It seems like hamstring issues on the same leg that he was dealing with issues on last season. That's pretty surprising, and that leaves this receiving group very barren. I mean, after Kittle, it's going to be all Juwan. Ayuk will have probably a pretty slow ramp up, but I mean, Juwan Jennings was a fantastic player last year. And I think like it's easy to just sort of see these guys come into the league and say like, that's who they're going to be forever. Juwan Jennings, I think, has improved dramatically since entering.
Are we worried about the buys? 3 week 14 buys on wide receiver?
Tyler? We're going to need a lot of receivers. I'm not.
Yeah, we are going to need a lot of wide receivers. I'm okay with it.
And
also,
I think
famously on a good team that typically matters for ultimate scoring.
Yeah.
And you look at projections, and I know Mike Clay has projected for one of the worst defenses in the league, which again matters. Like if we're going to get good pass volume, then absolutely interested in that. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, as we're almost 46 minutes into this stream, that tomorrow we will be live with Pete Overzet at 4 p.m. Eastern. Myself and Tyler, we will be drafting in BBM once more, and of course talking all things best ball. So do make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Jake, how are you feeling about this team as we're through 6 rounds?
Oh, I feel great. We got a lot of my guys so far, and I generally have found myself feeling the best about some of these more balanced builds, at least between running back and wide receiver, headed into some of these later rounds. Granted, I think there's plenty of merit to going, 0 RB in drafts overall. And I'm curious what you guys think, but overall, I feel like this is a great year for a variety of builds. I don't necessarily think that ADP is too heavily skewed in either direction, that it's pushing me toward anything. I felt like I've had great flexibility throughout my drafts, kind of getting whatever sort of builds I want.
Yeah, it's almost like entirely, you can talk more about it because you've done more volume than I have, like a couple of hundred drafts. But like, I feel that even dual RB starts are still viable this year because of the strength in the first 2 rounds. I feel particularly the first 20 picks in drafts this year are as strong as I can remember them being. I feel like, 0 RB works because of the influx of rookie running backs. And obviously hero RB tends to work consistently year to year because it allows you to be balanced. But like the way the dead zone has set up this year, the archetypes there just aren't the kind of archetypes that I'm worried about. And getting Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker as RB2 and RB3 when we've still got Malik Neighbors and Tet, like I'm completely fine with that.
Yeah, I think you can do a lot of different things because there's still rookies that are priced cheap. There's still offenses priced cheap because of concern and worry. And anytime you get that type of environment, I agree. You can really make any build work. And I do agree that like the balance builds. Are we comfortable with a round drop in Godwin, who still may start week 1? Because I am.
Yeah, no, I am absolutely okay with that.
Delightful. I don't think he falls much further than this because he can easily report in the next week or 2, as long as they still say he's potentially open for week 1. His ADP is going to stay fairly anchored. I think the best example of that is Brandon Ayuk, who has really only dropped about 8 to 10 spots in the last month because while it might be likely he starts on the pup, it's not confirmed. And so you still have folks saying, and also let's be honest, it's the least worrying part of the season that we care about for making money.
Yeah, and if you start on pup, like, we have to be really careful with the different variations of that, don't we? And I think people sometimes see, he's on pup, and is it going to be the type that leaves you on there for the start of the season, or is it going to be the one where you can come off at any time? So buying the dip on some of these guys, I'm absolutely fine with.
What would you like to do here with a 3-4-0-0 onesie build?
I don't feel very convicted on just about any of these guys. Probably Michael Pittman would be
bit of volume.
favorite pick.
I agree. I think he's got a high upside.
I was really hoping we'd get Downs there.
Yeah.
Downs to me sticks out as by far my favorite Colts pass catching pick. I don't mind Alec Pierce in best ball formats either, but
Same.
Downs seems really, really nice. Top 10 last year in first downs per outrun, targets per outrun for Josh Downs. He's the guy who gets fed the ball as long as Anthony Richardson is not under center.
Yeah, such a good player. I have come around to, JJ Zachariason and Harmon have talked about the value of I love Downs, and I think Downs is better, but I also have concerns that, like, just with this offense, he will always be a slot only guy, and that's gonna cap his ceiling a little bit. And we've seen the thesis that JJ and Harmon have talked about, which is Michael Pittman's a fine receiver, but the prototypical X that gets hyper focused in an RPO is gonna usually beat ADP because of like his ability to just get force fed, and he's a decent player. And so, yeah, I think that at this cost, getting a wide receiver, I think Dimes is a decently significant better passer in the short to intermediate area. And if not that significant, I think it's a significant enough trust in the coaching staff to press the pass button more often, while maintaining the rush pass option of the offense that Dimes has with his legs. And so not only does it give you like an out for either AR or Dimes, but I do think it slightly raises the floor and ceiling of the passing offense from a consistency standpoint. Just sustaining drives and being able to score more often. Coaching staff seemingly leaning that way as well. So this is the cheapest Pittman's ever been, and it seems like a very fine click to make, especially with the Week 17 matchup versus Jacksonville, which could just be two really bad defenses and two very exciting young offenses, just scoring a ton of points. We want to grab Fields with Brees, or do we want to grab the falling Murray naked with very late backstacks?
I think I'd rather take Fields if you guys are all right with that.
Yeah,
I mean, this Justin Fields has always been great for fantasy when he started. Generally, the issue in the past was is he going to play? Does the coaching staff trust him enough to play? And that's not really a concern this season. No. So I've been taking a lot of Fields over on DraftKings, and I mean, he's not particularly more expensive on Underdog, which is great too.
And DraftKings, you get the big bonuses, but on Underdog, it's like we know that Fields' profile is going to be a guy that's worth a top 5 pick in amongst quarterbacks. Like in BRs, he's going to be right there alongside Hurts, and you're getting that guy in the outside the top 100 on a regular basis.
Well, let's make this pick, and we'll come back to Brees in a second and Fields, because I feel like
anybody standing out to you here. We can reach for Loveland. I think we could do a lot of different things here, so I'm very comfortable going. Oh, let me go by ADP.
I'd go either Loveland or Tootin. I think we're pretty robust at running back still, so Loveland would probably be my stronger lean here.
Let's swing for Loveland. Yeah, just going back to Fields, I think the biggest thing for him is that that he's going to be okay handing the ball off more to Brees, and that's why I feel like it's a more viable stack in some ways, because yes, he's going to check the ball down even when unpressured. We know that Fields loves to check the ball down, but Brees just wasn't getting the red zone rush attempts last year, because when it got down to the red zone, it was all Aaron Rodgers. He was 7th in red zone pass attempts, whilst Brees Hall was 35th in red zone rush attempts. Inside the 5, Rodgers had the 5th most pass attempts, and Brees was 34th with just 8 attempts inside the 5. And Fields, because he doesn't have that same kind of level as Aaron Rodgers in terms of I'm going to do what I want, he's still playing for a future and still playing for a contract. I think he's going to be much more team and scheme focused, and because of that, I feel like we can capture the checkdowns to Brees Hall, but we can also capture the touchdowns, whether it's Justin Fields getting 2 in a game or whether it's Brees Hall getting some. So I think that stack makes sense. On the whole, Jake, how okay are you with stacking running backs and quarterbacks together?
Generally speaking, I'd say I'm pretty okay with it. I mean, when an offense is really moving the ball, it's pretty easy for both players to get you there. I think I'm probably the most hesitant to do it in like larger field DFS tournaments, because you really need that 1% outcome where, maybe the running back isn't necessarily stealing touchdowns from the quarterback or vice versa, but pretty much everywhere else, I'm okay taking a quarterback with a running back, especially in best ball. I think it's more than fine. It's mostly just a bet on the offense, and I think the Jets offense is a bit underrated this year.
And it's and one of the things we talked about is like this is an offense that easily condenses down to like Wilson and Brees, and maybe if a tight end matters, and neither tight end really stands out as like a huge target earner either. And making the bet on Brees is making the bet on his targets. And at that point, you do have some pretty good correlation from pass catcher to passer, and I think that's a boon for this stack. We are on the clock at pick 129. What do we feel like we want to do here? No obvious stacking partners standing out.
I mean, we could take Najee, just take the fall on Najee and say that's the running back room done. Nobody? No.
That's fine. I have a hard time having strong takes on any of those guys. Have you guys seen anything else on the Najee injury that's just struck me as so
The latest
strange?
Is Harbaugh saying he's here, he's in meetings, and that was just this week. Apparently he was reporting and in meetings. So and they said the doctors are handling this stuff. So I think at minimum, this is a price that if healthy and if starting week 1, he rises in ADP likely if the eye is not completely gone. And the GM and the team knew. They said the doctors knew what the Stanford doctors knew, and it was trending more positive. So everything I've heard is no reason to cause for like major concern. So I think getting a pretty high value contingent bet alone in an offense that I think is going to be valuable is a very fine click. Is it my favorite click? Not in the slightest, but I think the contingent upside alone in the news we've heard is this might be the lowest he goes because they do expect him to report to training camp at some point and start practicing.
Okay, so
we want to get a falling Herbert. Do we want to pull up a QJ? What do we want to do here amongst
6 seconds?
I don't mind let's go Herbert. I think the rushing upside there could be potentially underrated. I mean, I know that's something that's been talked about forever, that Justin Herbert's a great athlete, but I mean, regardless, I feel like he's probably going just a bit too low, given how talented he is overall. Do you guys have any Herbert takes?
Yeah, I mean, that's one which, like, we were talking about, like, over-under lines that would be worth getting before they kind of got pumped up too much. That's one which Underdog, I know, didn't have, but definitely is interesting because obviously you got Greg Roman. You've got Justin Herbert healthy to start the year this year, or at least hopefully. And it just seemed like there was an effort not to get him out there too much running. But this year we should see an increase in that. I believe Greg Roman gave quotes sort of talking about how they'd like to use his feet more. And obviously Greg Roman, for all his faults, can definitely maximize that side of it. So I'm interested in that. And you can push back on it and say, well, will Justin Herbert stay healthy if they start rushing with him more? But like in best ball, I just do not care.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Tyler, you look frozen to me.
Oh, did we lose Tyler?
Oh man, this is gonna be so. Tyler at the controls, possibly just fading out. This is going to be a fun one for myself and Jake sitting here. Obviously, a good chance to remind people we will be live at 4 p.m. Eastern with Pete Overzet tomorrow. This team so far, we've got Justin Fields, we've got Justin Herbert. Hopefully, Tyler is still able to draft as we go round here. We'll wait. Feels like maybe his AC's gone out and his house gone in a meltdown. Jake, you mentioned that you've got this kind of article coming about like quarterback pass tendencies. Were there any particular points within that really brought up anything unexpected for you?
Yeah, so one of the more interesting ones was that, I knew there was an impact on Jonathan Taylor's fantasy outputs, Anthony Richardson versus no Anthony Richardson. I didn't realize how dramatic it actually was. With Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor averaged 1.3 targets per game and 15.7 expected fantasy points per game. That's good for RB11 over the full season. But in his games without Anthony Richardson, that would be 8 games without Anthony Richardson, he was at 3.6 targets per game and 19.5 expected fantasy points per game, which would have been good for RB1 over the full year. I do feel like we're all a little too low on Jonathan Taylor if we assume we get a lot of Daniel Jones, but it is hard to, make that assumption. I think that's one of the tough things with Taylor is we could get to week 12 and then it's just Anthony Richardson for the rest of the season. I also think there's it's slim, but there is a chance that we end up with a guy like Riley Leonard, who's their quarterback 3 as the starter in those playoff weeks, which could be probably pretty bad for Jonathan Taylor, because I would imagine that means the offense was just a total disaster all year. But if Daniel Jones is the starter for 17 games, I think there's, at least a case that Jonathan Taylor is, in contention for the RB1 overall.
Yeah, I kind of struggle with him because he scored 40% of his points in 3 games, and that is always a little difficult. Now, obviously, that worked great for the team who won Best Ball Mania overall. They had a Bengals triple stack along with Jonathan Taylor, and if you had Jonathan Taylor in the playoffs, then it was a far more valuable pick than Saquon Barkley if you were looking to cash in big rather than just looking at advance rate. But I just I really hope it's not Anthony Richardson. It kills me to say that because Anthony Richardson should have been so fun. But you look back at quarterbacks since the year 2000 who have had 250 plus dropbacks, and there's only been 3 who've had under 50% completion rate. Tim Tebow, who went on to start 3 more games after that. Jamarcus Russell, who never started another NFL game. And then the lowest of the low is Anthony Richardson's 47.7% last year, which it's truly heartbreaking because, Josh Downs' splits with and without Anthony Richardson are pretty consistent, which speaks again to the fact that he's just a straight up dog. When it comes to Michael Pittman, the splits are much more volatile. And obviously you mentioned with Jonathan Taylor, the splits are much more volatile. And I would love to see Anthony Richardson maybe sit for a year and be in a situation which works for him. So, we'll see. Tyler is rebooting his internet and says he'll be with us soon. We got Ferg and Besh joining the squad as we ordered Ferg 10 picks after ADP and Besh because we sniped on Bryce. Getting internet back up. Stand by, you all. So anybody else that really, after you did the research for that article, that you were like, right, I'm going to have to push them up noticeably in my rankings to make sure I get more of them going forward?
Yeah, so I actually didn't specifically blurb Darnell Mooney, but I did think it was really interesting that Michael Penix, despite only 100 pass attempts, so, bit of a grain of salt there. I mean, he was targeting outside wide receivers at an absolutely insane rate. I mean, Drake London's stats with Michael Penix, 117 receiving yards per game, 13 targets per game, 2 end zone targets per game. Those are paces that would have led all wide receivers over the last 4 seasons. Ryan Heath articulated a great long form case for Drake London in his Anatomy of a League Winner article, which I consider a must read. But I think that also applies, Tom, to your guy, Darnell Mooney, who is one of my guys as well. I think both Atlanta outside wide receivers are great bets this year. Again, very small sample on Michael Penix, but it does seem like he really likes to target these outside wide receivers, and that's certainly encouraging for both Mooney and Drake London.
Yeah, and it's just the way he drives the ball downfield really feels like something which we can buy into from a fantasy perspective. We want upside. We want, and you talked about the defensive side of it, but there's going to be potentials for shootouts. There's going to be easier games, hopefully. And going back to week 16 and 17, Mooney caught 7 of his 11 targets for 119 yards with Penix. And I just don't really see a downside argument as to why I should be worried about it, because Mooney, for his part, yes, he hasn't really been the most consistent player, but I think part of the stink lands on him. Going back a few years in Chicago, people overdrafted him, and it was very much for somebody's got to catch it argument with him and Justin Fields out there. And it burned a lot of people, and that's always a dangerous argument to make. But Mooney hasn't been a bad player. I think it was his rookie year when he came into the league. he did plenty fine. Like I've got no qualms about taking Darnell Mooney, particularly when you can get him in that kind of 115 to 135 range, depending on which platform you're taking them. In terms of your overall best ball approach, Jake, and hopefully we'll get Tyler back up here in a minute and we can actually get back to actual best ball. Has there been anything you've noticed yourself doing much more of this year compared to last year, or anything that you came away from last year being like, we've got to do that?
Yeah, I feel like, and we already talked about this a little bit, but I think, last year wide receivers got pushed up so hard that I found myself taking a decent amount of running backs, a little bit more robust running back, a little bit more hero running back last year. This year, I think my builds are generally more balanced across the board. Like I sort of already mentioned, I feel like the market is in a better spot than it was last year with, wide receiver values just going absolutely crazy. Something that, I know I've talked about with other best ball players a decent bit is how we've only had 4 or 5 total slates of best ball since this game.
Sorry, Jake, just quickly, Tyler says dimes or dart for our quarterback. Obviously we've got Neighbors, Genty, Pierce, and Pittman for that.
I think I'd go Danny Dimes.
See, I'm happy with dart, but my first lean was dimes. Carry on. We've not had that much. We don't have that much to draw on. And Eric Beinfloor of Spike Week talks about it a lot of the time, and it's a great point because it is such a small sample size.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that led, the market just got a little ahead of its skis on wide receivers last year. And, we saw that, I think, most notably with Marvin Harrison, a rookie wide receiver who we were taking at the 1-2 turn. And he ended up being the Arizona Cardinals, sacrificial X. I don't necessarily see any position this year where the market's just gotten way too excited about it, which I think has made drafting best ball teams a little bit more pleasant because, last year, like I said, I would start out with a lot of those more robust running back builds, but then there would just be no wide receivers left by the time I was ready to take a wide receiver. What about you? Have you been changing your strategy at all this year?
Yeah, we'll get to it in a second. Tyler saying Lloyd, Hunter, Smith, or Brooks for a dart throw running back. This is definitely the future of drafting.
Yeah, exactly. I've been liking Lloyd, but yeah. I'd be fine with any of those guys. Hunter's solid too.
Yeah, we draft a lot of Lloyd here in Fantasy Sanctuary, so very much good with that. I would say that it's, and just going back slightly on your point, the small sample size is massive because you look at advance rates last year for 0 running back teams on Underdog, and they were drafted at the highest rate they've been drafted at, almost a 20% clip. 1 in 5 teams drafted was a 0 running back team with no running backs before round 6. And it had its worst success rate in years at 8% advance rates when we're looking for an average of 16%. But the year before was the year which 0RB crushed. So it was massively reactive. It was massively the worst scenario with the early running backs crushing, the top end wide receivers being a little bit down. So I think my biggest point has just been trying not to worry too much about things that we've known historically. I used to draft a lot going, okay, I would like to have 5 wide receivers by round 10. Now I've kind of eased off where it's okay, if I can get 4 by round 7, round 8, then I'm probably still on track because we do need more wide receivers than any other position. Typically, you've got 3 starting slots as well as the 2 running back positions and then the flex, which can be either. So it can be quite difficult leaning away from the wide receiver position totally, but I think that there is balance in just being okay, this is what the board gives me, this is what ADP is giving me, and as on real time says, balance is the key to life. Knowing what the board's giving you is absolutely a big part of it. And this year I've been trying to be a little more just cognizant and a little more humble of what we don't know. I am not somebody who's an expert film analysis. I'm not somebody who can break down rookies to the level of Brett or to Rich, who does it for our channel, or any of the incredible people out there. So instead, it's learning which information you want to trust and which stats matter, because it's so easy to open up any kind of stats database and try and tell a story to explain something that you already believe in. So yeah, just try to be humble and just try to say, okay, last year I missed out on a bunch of these.
Yeah. Yeah. How's it going there, Tyler?
Well, great time for your.
No.
Oh, nope.
Way too long.
The irony of this being that at the start of the draft, Tyler said that my internet looked a little bit choppy, but hey, we try to make it work. We styled it out. So look, Tyler sent me the finished team, which I'm going to recap here for us. In fact, let me just pull this up on screen so that we can actually see this one. There we go. And let me... No, that's not going to let me go much bigger. But we do have Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, Daniel Dimes at quarterback. So a fairly interesting mix of three quarterbacks there. Then we've got Ashton Genty, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Najee Harris, Jarquez Hunter for our running back room, Malik Neighbors, Ted McMillan, Juwan Jennings, Chris Godwin, Michael Pittman, Jack Besh, Alec Pierce, Darius Slayton, Colston Loveland, and Jake Ferguson at tight end. Jake, it got a little bumpy there. Tyler looks like he might be back properly. What are you saying about this one?
I think this is a great draft. I think we did a really good job nailing the build. And I mean, props to Tyler for drafting under adversity here. Tyler, this had to be real tough mid-internet outage.
Yeah, great time for internet to get completely crash out. Yeah, good job, Xfinity. Shout out. And a lovely time to also get a neighborhood dead zone. But thankfully, the one auto pick was Jake Ferguson after ADP, but I think that worked out nicely because it's a good offense we want pieces of, and it allowed our build to kind of get two tight ends, which I think, considering that we had to make it up at receiver, I think a 3-5-8-2 ended up probably being the build we would likely end with. I regret pushing Bryce Young around the corner as I fumbled to try to get internet back up and going. And as you can see, Bryce does get sniped from us, so would have ideally liked the Bryce Young stack, but settled for just stacking up a rookie receiver in this build. Made a lot of sense with our Las Vegas build. You mentioned Alec Pierce, so thankfully just added that in. And, we adjust. We get the double stack Dimes, Slayton as a stack on New York to either give us a double stack Dimes or a double stacked Jackson Dart, but also just get as many pieces of that game stack, because I think similarly, along the lines of really bad defenses can lead to some of the highest scoring outings in the final week. And then, it was a tough call, and I put on my thinking cap and I said, who would be a fantasy points darling for a late running back dart? And I thought, who else than one of the most explosive backs on a very good offense that has contingent upside in Jarquez Hunter. And voila, there we go.
Love it.
Yeah, I think it's a fun team, obviously, through adversity. Jake, well, let's talk about the running back room then, because we went Ashton Genty, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Najee Harris, and then Jarquez Hunter. If we had been on the clock, do you think there would have been an argument for leaving it at 4, or would you have preferred to end up with 5 like we did?
I really don't mind rounding it out to 5. I think you could go either way here. I still think we ended up with pretty solid wide receiver and tight end rooms. And obviously we already had 3 quarterbacks. So I really don't mind the 5th running back pick, but when your running back room looks like this, you can go with either 4 or 5. I'm curious if you guys have a strong take there.
Tyler?
I know Tom likes to push it to the limit, and considering that we only had 2 guys overlapping with a bye, I definitely think it's something you discuss. To me, there wasn't a huge, and I'll act like I had a lot of time thinking this through, as if I wasn't scrambling to fill it in. But like when we're back on the clock, the tight ends to think about are Schultz, Gray, Barner. Arroyo goes much earlier, and that's a fun click. But outside of that, we're staring at names like Firemouth, Theo, Terrence Ferguson, Conklin. We could have tried to go for a stack, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we see LA rotating these guys just like they did last year, even if Gadsden's exciting. I don't know that any of these tight ends get over 30 or 40% snaps and routes, and then we're just throwing a dart on one of 3 guys that can catch a touchdown. And to me, instead of having to solve that puzzle, we just take a rookie running back that might get returner snaps and might get, hey, give Kyron a breather snaps, and we know he's explosive. And if we're talking about a guy that could be the guy you need either in the playoffs or week 17, to me, this is clearly the type of archetype you go for versus a random third tight end. And I think you could say that with a lot of these running backs, but this felt like the biggest upside shot the roster could add. And that was the theme of the cast. So to me, that's the tiebreaker, all things considered. And then you also never know, over the course of a season, having a 5th running back who potentially could access one big spike week is probably adding a lot more to your roster than 3.5 projected points on Underdog from a rando shit tight end.
Yeah. I mean, the way we played it in terms of running back room, I like to have that conversation, but I think when you take your 5th running back past pick 200, I have absolutely no problem with it because the amount of draft capital you're expending on it, it's not anything that I'm too worried about. Like we saw from last year's BBM winner that you don't need to be perfect with every draft pick. Like Jermaine Burton gave that team absolutely nothing throughout the season, and it didn't matter. Like that team hit on enough pieces elsewhere, and if Jarquez Hunter gives us the upside that we think he can, then I'm absolutely down with it. But this was a lot of fun, obviously fun in a different way, and probably not much fun for Tyler. But Jake, you mentioned that you've got that article coming out, but what else have you got going on at Fantasy Points now that you're back from the land of the UFL?
Yeah, so you can find all my great content over at Fantasy Points. As Tom mentioned, I have an article, quarterback positional target tendencies, that should be out soon. It's done. I'm waiting on some graphics, so I'm not sure exactly when that'll be published. Either later this week, early next week, I would imagine, on that. And then after that, I will be working on some player consistency articles. I wrote a whole series on this, I think 2 years ago, and it ended up being very well received. So I'll be writing about that again. I don't think I'll be doing anything particular to preseason DFS, but I know I'll be doing plenty of DFS writing once we get into the regular season. Absolutely adore DFS. DFS plus football is like just the greatest thing ever. So I really can't wait for the regular season. But yeah, you can catch all my writing, any pods I do over at fantasypoints.com in the meantime, while we wait for DFS season to get going here.
Yeah, absolutely recommend people go and check out all Jake's work. One of the smartest guys around. True pleasure to have you here in the Fantasy Sanctuary with us tonight. We will be back tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, with Pete Overzet for what should be no doubt a very fun show. Tyler, where is the Trifle Tower? Where's it drafting this week?
Tyfel Tower is housed in and of itself these days, so we'll be live Thursday, probably around 5:30 Central, 6:30 Eastern, for your local toxic but somehow wholesome best ball content. And I just want to echo that, Jake's content is phenomenal stuff. One of the best regular season DFS shows, very underrated. Very in-depth, love the content, always and for Underdog drafter folks, a super helpful BR strategy type of mindset for these DFS type of weekly games. So cannot say enough good things about that. But so Tyfel Tower, Thursday, 5:30 Central, 6:30 Eastern, unless Best Ball Guy cancels again, because we're not naming names for why schedules don't work out.
Well, on that toxic tower note, let's get out of it. Jake, thank you once again. Tyler, always a pleasure. We'll be back very soon.